They say family is everything, until the day your own sister takes a knife to your career and twists it with a smile. My name is Claire Morgan, and a year ago I had everything I'd ever dreamed of. A loving husband, a new business, a future I could finally see clearly. But then she walked in, Samantha. Elegant, smirking, poison wrapped in pearls. What followed was betrayal so sharp it nearly broke me. But here's the thing about being underestimated. It only makes your comeback hit harder. And mine? Well, it started in a little town called Willow Creek. The soft morning light filtered through the lace curtains of Claire Morgan's small kitchen window as she poured 2 cups of coffee, her hands trembling ever so slightly. Today was the day. Her studio, Bright Edge Photography, was finally opening. The sign had just gone up last week, hand-painted and polished to perfection, now hanging proudly over the glass storefront on Maple Street. She had dreamt of this for years, and now it was real. Jack Sullivan, her husband of 5 years, stepped into the kitchen, still in his grease-streaked work shirt. He leaned against the counter, grinning. "You beat the sunrise today," he teased, eyes warm. "Guess the sun needed to borrow a little spotlight from Bright Edge, huh?" Claire chuckled, her nerves easing slightly. That was Jack, always knowing exactly what to say to ground her. The studio was perfect. A cozy main room with soft wood floors, a clean white backdrop for portraits, a custom-built desk for editing, and a corner wall lined with her best work, families, weddings, corporate headshots. Claire walked the space one more time, straightening a frame, fluffing a pillow, smoothing her dress. Her phone buzzed. It was an email from Lexford Dynamics. Her breath hitched. She opened it. "Claire Morgan, we are pleased to confirm our 3-month contract for corporate photography services, including headshots and internal events at our Seattle headquarters." Her hands flew to her mouth. She blinked, then read it again. "Jack!" she called out, nearly knocking over a lamp. "Jack, they said yes!" Jack burst in, grinning wider than ever. He lifted her off the floor in one spin before setting her down. "Told you, you're the real deal." Later that afternoon, they celebrated in Jack's garage. He popped a bottle of cheap champagne he'd stashed in the back of his toolbox, and old-school rock music played softly from the corner radio. Mike Reynolds, Jack's old mentor, dropped by with a dusty photo frame. Inside was a faded picture of Claire, camera in hand, sitting on a workbench in this very garage. "Never forget where you started," Mike said, clapping her on the back. As evening fell and the excitement calmed, Claire curled up on the couch beside Jack, resting her head on his shoulder. "Do you think I'm ready?" she whispered. "Lexford is big." Jack looked at her and said simply, "Claire, you've been ready. The world's just catching up." And with that, the chapter closed with a quiet confidence. She had no idea that what came next would test every ounce of that belief. The morning buzzed with quiet energy as the first client stepped into Bright Edge Photography, all smiles and curiosity. Claire welcomed them with practiced grace, camera ready, heart fluttering. Her first official shoot as a professional studio owner. It was happening. That's when the glass door opened with a sharp chime, and in walked Samantha Whitmore. "Claire Bear!" Samantha cooed, stepping in like she owned the place. Dressed in a designer coat with heels clicking against the hardwood floor, she carried a bouquet so large it looked like it belonged at a wedding. Claire blinked. "Sam, I wasn't expecting you." "Surprise," Sam sang, eyes scanning the studio like she was inspecting a motel. She walked to the display wall, pausing at a family portrait. "Still doing the creative stuff, huh? Cute." Claire forced a smile. "I'm building a brand," she said simply. That evening, over a roast dinner in Claire's cozy kitchen, the tension sharpened. Jack had insisted on keeping it casual, no wine, no drama, but Sam didn't need alcohol to stir a storm. She swirled her glass of water like it was champagne, launching into tales of Nathan's latest achievement. "He's just been promoted," she announced. "Hospital leadership wants him to take on more national roles. We're even looking at a vacation home in the Hamptons." Claire bit her tongue. Jack passed her the salad bowl, trying to shift the subject, but Sam wasn't done. "Claire, I mean this kindly. she said, smiling tightly. "You're talented, sure. But don't you think it's time to think bigger? Nathan says the arts, well, they're not exactly stable. It's more hobby than career, really." Claire didn't answer. She stared at her plate, her appetite gone. Jack reached under the table, giving her hand a firm squeeze. As Sam stood to leave, she offered a kiss on the cheek and a dazzling grin. "Proud of you, sis," she said, voice syrupy sweet. Claire watched her go, her chest tight. Something in Sam's visit hadn't felt right, and deep down, a quiet warning had begun to echo. The days that followed were unusually quiet. Claire noticed it first in her calendar. Bookings that should have confirmed didn't. 2 rescheduled, 1 cancelled outright. Then the call came. Lexford Dynamics was terminating the contract. No explanation. She sat frozen at her desk, eyes glassy, rereading the terse email. Due to internal considerations, will no longer require Bright Edge Photography's services. Panic clawed at her throat. Emily Tran called that afternoon, whispering into the phone from a coffee shop across town. "Claire, I found out what happened. You need to sit down." Claire braced herself. "It's Sam," Emily said. "She emailed Lexford's marketing team, claimed you had an unethical conflict of interest. She sent them a portfolio. Bad photos, Claire, ones you never took. She made it look like you were incompetent." Claire's mouth went dry. "She even recommended someone else," Emily continued. "Brittany Saunders, you know, that friend of hers who just started photography." Claire sat in the darkened studio for hours. The photos on the wall mocked her now, proof of a dream turned illusion. She didn't cry, not yet. That night, Jack came home. He found her in silence, curled up on the floor, still in her work clothes. He didn't ask questions. He knelt beside her, wrapped his arms around her, and whispered into her hair, "You're the light, Claire. I won't let anyone dim that." She finally wept. But beneath the tears, something stirred, anger, hurt, and the faintest ember of resolve. The hume of the garage was steady, comforting, until Jack put down his wrench with more force than necessary. Oil stained his sleeves, sweat glistened on his brow, but his mind wasn't on the carburetor in front of him. It was on Claire, and the silence that had overtaken her since Lexford dropped the contract. Something had to give. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. "Mike," he said when the voice answered, "I need a favor." Mike Reynolds, his old mentor and now a well-respected advisor for the state's automotive board, sounded surprised. "Jack? What's going on?" Jack explained everything. The sabotage, the photos, the cancelled contract. There was a pause, and then Mike chuckled. "Richard Stillman, CEO of Lexford, owes me a few strokes on the back nine. Let me make a call." 2 hours later, Mike sent over Claire's real portfolio, with a personal note vouching for her professionalism and integrity. "If Lexford can't tell the difference between brilliance and a scam," Mike wrote, "they're the ones who need their lenses adjusted." Claire didn't know what Jack had done, only that he was unusually calm that night. He cooked her favorite dinner, hummed to himself as he cleaned up, and when she asked why he wasn't worried, he simply said, "Because I know the truth, and it always finds a way back." 3 days passed in a haze of uncertainty. Then, on a sunny Tuesday morning, her inbox pinged. Her hands shook as she opened the email from Lexford. "Claire Morgan, we sincerely apologize for the confusion. After reviewing additional materials, we would like to reinstate our contract and request your services for our upcoming gala." Tears streamed down her face before she even finished reading. Not just relief, but validation. She wasn't crazy. She wasn't small. She was worthy. She ran to Jack at the garage, the printout clutched in her hand. He didn't say anything, just opened his arms. In that quiet embrace, Claire felt it, not revenge, not triumph, but peace. This wasn't about taking down Sam anymore. This was about reclaiming herself. Rain tapped gently against the studio windows as Claire sorted equipment, trying to focus. The world was moving again. Lexington was back on, her schedule was filling up, but something still hung in the air. Closure hadn't come yet. Then the door opened. Brittany Saunders stood in the entryway, drenched and clearly nervous. Claire froze. "Can we talk?" Brittany asked, voice barely above a whisper. They sat, the air thick with unspoken tension. Brittany pulled out her phone and scrolled. "I didn't know how to say this before," she said, "but you need to see what Sam sent me." Claire leaned in as Brittany showed her the messages. Direct quotes. Sam pressuring her to accept the contract under false pretenses. "Just say they found you randomly," one read. Another, "Don't worry, Claire's stuff is soft. You'll shine by comparison." Claire stared at the screen, numb. She wasn't angry, just hollow. "She used both of us," she said finally. Brittany nodded, guilt in her eyes. "I didn't want it like this. I'm sorry." Emily came by later that afternoon. Claire showed her the messages. Emily, ever efficient, pulled out her laptop and began drafting a report. "This is internal gold," she said. "Lexford's PR team needs to see it, and I know the right people in the photography circuit." By the next morning, whispers had begun. Sam's name surfaced in private forums, not as the successful wife of a doctor, but as someone who manipulated, lied, and discredited a peer for gain. She wasn't blacklisted, not officially, but doors were starting to close. Claire stood in her studio, arms crossed, watching the rain slide down the windows. She turned to Emily. "They can lie to everyone else," she said quietly, "but they can't lie to themselves forever." Emily nodded. "And the truth? It always develops in the light." Golden lanterns swayed gently in the breeze as guests arrived at the annual Morgan family gathering. The vineyard glowed in the fading light, Napa Valley stretching out behind it like a dreamscape, but beneath the shimmer of crystal glasses and curated canapes, tension buzzed like static. Claire and Jack arrived with Emily and Brittany, dressed simply but elegantly. Claire's smile was genuine, Jack's grip on her hand steady. They took in the grand spectacle. Valets, imported wines, chandeliers hanging from old oak trees. Then came the grand entrance. Samantha descended from a sleek black Mercedes with Nathan at her side. She was wrapped in a gown that probably cost more than Claire's camera setup, her laughter too loud, her compliments too rehearsed. Dinner began with speeches, Karen, their dignified aunt, raising a glass in welcome. Conversation flowed, and Sam naturally dominated. "Nathan was just invited to speak in Europe," she beamed. "We're thinking of buying a summer place in the Hamptons." Claire sipped her wine. Brittany rolled her eyes. Jack just smiled. When Aunt Karen asked Jack about his work, he answered with quiet pride. "Still keeping the ambulances running. Just tuned up a whole fleet last week." Sam laughed, sharp and thin. "Oh, you're still working at that garage. I figured you'd moved into something more professional by now." Nathan stiffened beside her. Claire turned to her sister, voice calm, smile soft. "Everyone brings value in their own way, Sam. Some of us don't need applause to know we're making a difference." The table went silent. Sam blinked, caught off guard. For once, she had no comeback. That night, as the string quartet played in the background and laughter echoed in the distance, it became clear to everyone watching. Samantha Whitmore's world was polished on the outside, but cracking underneath. Claire, meanwhile, didn't need the spotlight. She had something stronger. Substance. The night had settled deep over the winding road leading away from Morgan Ranch when the screech of metal broke through the silence. Samantha's sleek black Mercedes sputtered, shuddered, and finally let out a piercing, grinding noise before rolling to a dead stop on the shoulder. Inside, Sam's perfectly curated calm collapsed. Nathan, tense in the passenger seat, tried to call for roadside assistance, but it was nearly 1 a.m. and no one would come. Sam stared at her phone, teeth clenched. With a sigh that burned her pride, she muttered, "Call Jack!" 15 minutes later, Jack pulled up in his tow truck, headlights cutting through the fog. He said nothing as he examined the vehicle. "I'll bring it to the shop," he said simply, not waiting for approval. At Reynolds Auto, the mood was tense. Claire arrived with him, still in her evening clothes. Brittany was there too, sipping coffee in the corner, while Mike leaned quietly near the entrance. Jack rolled under the car and emerged minutes later with a tight expression. "Your brake system is shot, transmission's a mess, electrical's been ignored for years." Sam crossed her arms. That's impossible. This car is... I'm telling you what I see, Jack cut in calmly. The silence cracked when Nathan finally spoke. She's right, he said quietly. I've put off maintenance, we're in debt, the car's on a lease we can't afford, and I didn't get promoted. I'm not even close. Claire watched as Sam's expression crumbled. Her voice trembled, then rose to a furious pitch. I can't live like you people. I have to hold on to something. I won't be seen as small, as average. I won't lose face. No one answered. There was no judgment, only understanding, and a kind of sadness. For the first time, the mask fell. The Samantha everyone had known, the perfect image, the polished facade, shattered under the weight of her own expectations. And in that garage, beneath the harsh fluorescent light, the truth hummed louder than the broken engine ever could. Morning poured into the Bright Edge studio through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting soft light on framed portraits and a fresh bouquet Brittany had brought in. Claire was reviewing client bookings when the door creaked open. Sam stood there, makeup-free, hair loosely tied back, wearing jeans and a sweater far more modest than usual. She didn't look defeated, just tired. I need some headshots, she said flatly, for the hospital charity gala. Claire paused, meeting her sister's eyes. My schedule's full, she replied, gently but firmly. But Brittany's available. She's great. For a second, Sam didn't react. Then she gave a slight nod, turned, and left without another word. Later that day, Nathan stopped by the garage. He and Jack spoke quietly near the back office. I'm leaving, Nathan said. Florence, a program there needs surgical support. I need the space. Time to reflect. That same afternoon, an internal email circulated through the hospital's charity committee. Samantha Whitmore had been quietly removed from the planning board. No official statement, no defense. By evening, a gossip blog posted a photo of Sam walking out mid-gala rehearsal with the headline, When Reputation is Just Smoke. Claire sat on her porch with Jack and Brittany, watching the sun dip low. No celebration, no revenge, just stillness. Sam's world hadn't exploded, it had quietly deflated. And oddly, that hurt more. Not because Claire wanted her to suffer, but because she had watched her sister slowly destroy herself with pride. It was just past 7 a.m. when Jack found a neatly wrapped package waiting on his desk at Reynolds Auto. Inside was a thick folder stamped with the emblem of St. Augustine Medical Center. A letter rested on top. Jack, thanks for saving Dr. Benjamin's car. We've been looking for someone reliable to handle our ambulance fleet. You're it. He stood in silence for a moment, then grinned and raised the folder in the air like a trophy. Meanwhile, Bright Edge buzzed with new life. Claire, now fully booked months in advance, had hired 2 more photographers and officially promoted Emily to Director of Communications. Brittany helped coordinate shoots and edit footage late into the evenings. The studio thrived. That weekend, the backyard came alive with string lights and the smell of pizza, a quiet celebration, no speeches, no grand toasts, just laughter, soft music, and the comfort of people who had shown up when it mattered most. Claire leaned back in her chair, watching Jack toss a slice of pepperoni to Mike. She thought of all the nights she'd doubted herself, nights when the silence felt heavier than any insult Sam had ever thrown. Now, there was only peace, hard-earned, unshakable. She looked toward the studio, glowing from the kitchen window, and smiled. The journey hadn't been clean or easy, but it had been real. And that, she realized, was all she ever needed. The first crisp breeze of autumn swept through Willow Creek as golden leaves danced along the sidewalk outside Bright Edge Photography. Inside the studio, morning sunlight spilled through the sheer curtains, painting everything in warm, amber tones. Claire stood by the window with a mug of coffee in hand, breathing in the quiet, the kind of quiet that didn't feel empty but full of peace, of presence. Her phone buzzed gently against the windowsill. It was Brittany. Claire answered with a smile. Morning! Brittany's voice was casual, but laced with something unspoken. Just thought you'd want to know. Sam left town. Quietly, no party, no goodbye posts. Nathan's staying in Florence. Word is, she didn't go with him. Claire leaned against the frame of the window, letting the news sink in. She wasn't surprised, not anymore. "Thanks for telling me," she said softly. They exchanged a few more words, small things, plans for lunch, updates on new clients, before Claire hung up and set her phone down. She crossed the room to her wall of portraits, a quiet gallery she'd curated over the past year. An elderly couple laughing over coffee, a newborn baby asleep on a father's chest, a young executive staring straight into the lens with quiet confidence. A high school senior in a Letterman jacket caught mid-laugh. Each photo told a story. Not one was famous, not one went viral, but they mattered. To someone, they meant the world. Emily peeked in briefly with a clipboard and a to-do list. "Your 10 a.m. couple is on their way. Just got engaged last week. Total sweethearts." Claire nodded, her eyes still on the photos. "Tell them to take their time." When the couple arrived, Claire welcomed them warmly. She adjusted the lighting, offered them water, asked about how they met. As the camera began to click, she didn't think about awards or mentions in industry journals. She didn't think about Sam or about what used to hurt. She just focused on this moment, this couple, this love. She clicked the shutter again and again, capturing light in all its quiet honesty. Later that evening, as she packed up, she paused to look around the studio once more, now a space filled not just with art, but with purpose. She smiled to herself. A different kind of success lived here now, one that didn't shout, one that didn't need anyone's permission. Her voice came soft, steady, a whisper to the room, or maybe to herself. "You don't have to prove your worth to the world. Just live it. The world will see." And with that, she turned off the lights and stepped into the fading daylight. Sometimes life teaches us that real success isn't loud. It doesn't come with applause or shiny labels. It's found in quiet resilience, in choosing integrity when no one's watching, in rebuilding with grace after being broken. The world may chase appearances, but it's character that stands the test of time. If this story made you feel something, anger, hope, reflection, then let it stay with you. Let it remind you of what truly matters. Thank you for listening. If you've ever faced something similar, share your thoughts below. I'd love to hear your story. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay with us for more.